You're listening to the Unlocking Africa podcast.
Essentially, what we do is we help clients employ people that they want across borders. So we do that globally, and what differentiates us is that we have 120 legal entities of our own. Once you're one of our clients, then all of a sudden the whole world is your oyster, and we can help our clients move to places they didn't necessarily plan to move. We currently work in around 20 countries in Africa, and that number is growing all the time. We're also witnessing a lot of people moving to Africa, especially from Asia, to actually set up their own companies. This trend will lead more and more countries to look at Africa and work there.
Stay tuned as we bring you inspiring people who are unlocking Africa's economic potential. You're listening to the Unlocking Africa podcast with your host, Tessa Adamu.
Welcome to the Unlocking Africa podcast, where we find amazing people who are doing amazing things to unlock Africa's economic potential. Today, we have Noam Kan, who is Director of Business Development at XML, which is a company that offers workforce solutions in Africa and globally. Welcome to the podcast, Noam. How are you?
Thank you, Tersa. Thank you for having me. Just fine. Thank you.
I know we've been having this conversation for quite a while, so it's great that the date has arrived and we can finally have the conversation about the great work that you're doing in Africa. I know you've listened to the podcast before, and you're probably aware that I like to start from the beginning. So can you please introduce yourself and tell us a little bit more about Noam Kan?
Yes, absolutely. So my name is Noam Kan. I work as a Director of Business Development at XML International, as you've already mentioned. In my background, I was raised in Israel and I spent some time in the Israeli submarine fleet, after which I decided to pursue an MBA and move to the UK. So I studied an MBA at a London Business School and right afterwards joined XML International, and here I am.
So can you tell us a bit more about the company, the work that you're currently doing globally and in Africa?
Yes, absolutely. So XML International is a global workforce company. Essentially, what we do is we help clients employ people that they want across borders. Legally speaking, if you want to employ someone anywhere, you're going to need to have a legal entity there to register them. Once you do, you're going to need a team of HR and a team of finance to deal with the payroll and everything. So a lot of clients find it really hard to operate across borders. And some of them choose to open their own legal entities. It depends on the size. But if you don't really want to open your own legal entity because of all of the time and money involved, you can go through a service provider. And that's essentially what we are. We provide services of employment across borders to clients. So we do that globally, and what differentiates us really is that we have 120 legal entities of our own, which helps us work truly in a global setting across all continents and all of the major economic hubs and help our clients expand, essentially.
Fantastic. So you've told us XML is a global workforce company, and you've given us a top-line overview of what that involves. I know that XML's mission is to deliver global workforce solutions, as you mentioned, to help clients expand and excel by overcoming geographical barriers. Can you give us a bit more insight into how you go about achieving that?
Yeah, absolutely. So the way we help our clients, besides helping solving these employment problems, is that we can also provide them with additional support. So we can help them move people across borders, not only to one specific location, but also, assemble a team in one place and move it to another, or enable them to work remotely. We also deal with insurance issues, work permits, visa permits. So once you have someone and you know that you want them to work someplace, it might be a local person, and in that case, it's not going to be really difficult, but it might be, an expat, and then you're going to need to make sure that they can actually set foot in the country if you want to, if you need to deploy them rather than just employ them. And what we do is we solve these problems because we have our own team of legal experts that can help get this visa. We have our own legal presence in the country, so we can register people under our name. And that's how we support our clients. And then if they want to pursue additional opportunities, we can essentially remove the whole problem of borders for them. Because once you're one of our clients, then all of a sudden the whole world is your oyster, so to speak. And we can help our clients move to places they didn't necessarily plan to move. If suddenly an opportunity comes up, then all of a sudden it's not such a big problem to move across borders because you can go through us.
Fantastic. So you detailed that you provide additional support moving people across borders in many ways in terms of overcoming challenges such as work permits and visa requirements. So I guess if we look specifically at your work in Africa, how many countries on the continent have you successfully delivered workforce solutions in?
Yeah, absolutely. So we currently work in around 20 countries in Africa.
Oh, brilliant.
Yeah, and that number is growing all the time. Africa has more than 50 countries, and we're getting to each of them one by one. Opening legal entities is indeed a long process, but our core strategy is to build a presence everywhere eventually. So we will get to all of these countries, but we definitely operate in all of the major economic hubs in Africa. So those would be, the countries such as Kenya and South Africa and Nigeria and Uganda. But we also operate in places that are really difficult for some of our clients. And it really depends on the client and what they need. But not many clients need to work in places such as Somalia and Mali, which are currently facing quite a bit of a challenge in finding employment for people. But we do operate there. And it really depends on the needs of our client. And if a client comes with a need for, a new country in which we coincidentally don't already work, then we'll find a solution for that as well.
Fantastic. So you detailed that you've worked in 20 African countries, working in some of the larger markets such as Kenya, Nigeria, and also some of the more challenging markets such as Mali and Somalia. So I guess, admittedly, there are a lot of companies globally that offer workforce solutions. So what differentiates XML from its competitors?
So that's a really good question. And I would say that two things differentiate XML. Firstly, providing global workforce solutions require these legal entities, as we mentioned. And one of the main things that you'll find with our competitors is that they do operate in many places, but they don't actually have their own legal entities. And that's possible. What they do essentially is they partner up with someone locally to provide a local service. But they can't guarantee what those terms will be, and they can't always solve the problems that our clients may have. And they also don't really have the expertise to handle complex issues. So they will have to go through another provider, and that's a consequence of that. So that's the first thing that differentiates us. We have our own legal entity, and as a result, we have the expertise and we have the ability to provide really complex solutions. So sorry, those were kind of two squashed into one there, but just to clarify, we have our own legal entities, and that allows us to provide consistency, expert advice, and expert solutions, and solve problems that our competitors will not necessarily be able to solve.
Fantastic. So you've given us great insight into what differentiates you from your competitors. So if you look at it more from the employee perspective, where do you feel that you add value when it comes to workforce solutions and employment in Africa to African employees?
Oh, that's a great question. And I think that it kind of ties into the whole issue of unlocking Africa pretty nicely, because the thing with Africa right now is that it's growing and we see a lot of talent and actually a talent surplus in many of these countries. And as an employer there that can unlock companies or enable companies outside of Africa to move into Africa, I think that what we add in terms of value is providing a lot more opportunities for people.
Yes.
So those opportunities can be both for people within Africa who are looking to stay in Africa and continue their employment there, but are looking for globally competitive firms. This helps the continent in general, I think, but I think we can get there later. In terms of the employees themselves, it just helps them with finding more opportunities.
Yes.
And additionally, I would say that many places in Africa still struggles in terms of protections and rights to workers. And as we move forward, I would like to see the continent rise up to better employment terms for employees. And I think that that's one of the things that we're bringing to the continent. We're bringing, when we operate there, we of course operate according to the local standards at the bare minimum, but we also have our own standards that we never break from. And I think that allows employees to work for companies with better protections, better rights, better pay often. And I think that's a great benefit for them.
Brilliant. So I guess this ties into my next question in terms of, obviously, you provide services globally, not just in Africa. So how does your approach or methodology differ when working specifically in the African market?
And that's a good question, but I hesitate to say that we do have a different strategy there because we try to be a very global company.
Yes.
And at our core, this is the business model, but we don't want to treat Africa differently. And I think that's important for the future of the company, but also in the present, because Africa has a lot of potential and a lot of opportunity. And we're trying to get that opportunity to mature and to be executed upon. And we don't necessarily treat it differently, I'd say. We treat it just as we treat every other continent, with potential employees, potential places to do business between companies that need services and providers that can provide these services, whether these are employees or partners within the country. And we just want these to come into fruition, so to speak.
Fantastic. So, earlier on, you detailed what differentiates XML from its competitors. One of them being your presence underground operationally and also as a, commercial entity. So if we look at the operational side in terms of the network of partners you've built on the ground, how have you gone about developing your network of partners and professionals in those markets?
Yeah, so it kind of built itself, I would say. It followed after our operation. So a big client would want to do a project in Africa, for example, and then it would require, let's say, a couple of dozens of people on the ground for an ad hoc mission. So we would organize all of that. We would transfer the people, train them, get them on the ground, insure them, register them, onboard them and get them up to speed so that they can do the work. And then they would do the work and the project would end and they would move on to another project. But during that process, we built a lot of local know-how, local partners, and also a network of employees with whom we keep in touch. So these employees know us and sometimes come back to us to seek additional employment, or sometimes clients come up to us back and get connected with these employees. So it's kind of a network based on our expertise and our past work. We haven't really targeted this. It kind of came about as a result of our operations.
Fantastic. So I'm assuming with these local partners on the ground, they are keyed into some of the local trends or insights happening within their market. From your perspective, what are some of the workforce-related changes or trends that you're seeing that are probably specific to Africa?
That's a great question. I would say that Africa right now is experiencing a boom of skilled work. And that boom kind of started 15 years ago or so. So 15 years back, you couldn't really find skilled workers, at least not to a sufficient degree that there would actually be a surplus in the market there. And now in the last 15 years, we've slowly seen an increase in the number of these skilled professionals. So you're going to struggle to find someone who has 20 years of experience or 25 years of experience in Africa. But as you lower that number, you go to 10 years of experience, you're definitely going to find more and more of those. Now, the trend is that because skilled workers continue to enter the market or enter the workforce, so to speak, you can see more and more of them. And this section, or this age section of workers, I would say, continues to age and mature. So you're going to have, in 5 years, you're going to have professionals with 20 years of experience, but you don't have them now. So the trend is that the market is maturing in terms of skilled workers. And just to clarify, we've worked with multiple workers in multiple fields. So those would be cybersecurity, IT, telecommunications, engineering, energy. So when I say skilled workers, I'm talking about workers who work in these fields, but it's not as specific as, just engineers or something like that. It is pretty broad, but it does fall under the umbrella of skilled workers. And I think that this is my personal opinion, that this trend will just continue. We will just get additional skilled workers and this surplus will increase, which has its pros and cons. Like, you don't necessarily want a surplus, but it just goes to show that people in Africa are getting educated, know how to provide skilled work, know how to solve problems for clients. And I expect that to continue growing. But as we move forward, I think it's very important that we continue to nurture this talent, because we don't want it to dry up and then we'll have a range of 15 years of skilled employees with nothing behind them. So let's say in 5 years, we would want people with 2 years of experience rather than just people with 7, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I know what you mean. Obviously, we want to keep generating a pipeline of skilled workers.
Yeah, so that's the trend then.
Yeah. Something that you slightly touched upon, I was hoping you could go into more detail, which was what type of jobs or roles are your clients looking to fill in Africa and why?
Yeah, that's a great question. Again, we work with very many clients in very many fields, and it's quite hard to say that there's something specific, because we have had projects in energy and we have had projects in data analytics or data collection, like cloud infrastructure and stuff like that. But if I would point out the things that are most common in Africa, at least from our experience, those would be IT and telecommunications. And I guess that, I'm not an expert on the global dynamics of economics, but I would say that because the continent is maturing and progressing and developing, many of its countries are now going through the phase in which all of these things are being set up. In terms of IT, as the countries in Africa mature, they're going to need more infrastructure, more connections, more people using advanced equipment. So that's why we need more IT solutions. And that's why we've had quite a few clients who needed that. In terms of telecommunications, I think that mobile is especially important in Africa, especially in places where people don't have access to banks, and the banking infrastructure in developing countries is usually a lot more reliant on mobile phones rather than brick and mortar bank offices. It's mostly online and on the mobile. So I think that might explain it. But again, I'm not an expert on these issues. These are just my assumptions, but definitely IT and telecommunications.
Interesting. So I guess you've said IT and telecommunications seem to be the main sectors or areas that you're seeing interest for employment. So if you look at the actual jobs, are you seeing more entry level, senior management, middle management? What kind of job roles?
The way we operate is that our clients come to us with a specific project in mind, and many of the times they require a full solution. So they will require maybe 2 very skilled professionals, let's say 15 years, although years don't necessarily show experience, right? You can have someone who's a senior after 3 years and someone who's a junior still after 15 years. Although usually they come together, there's no real connection there. But yeah, we definitely see people coming to us and asking for a full solution. So they would require 2 seniors and maybe 5 juniors and maybe someone in between. Usually the middle tier is less populated, I would say.
Yeah.
But interestingly enough, from a workforce perspective, it's actually harder to find juniors than it is to find seniors sometimes, because, sorry if this is a bit of a tangent, but senior employees leave a footprint and you know them, you've worked with them, you can contact them very easily, whereas finding juniors can sometimes be a bit more problematic. But yeah, just In terms of volume, it's always going to be more juniors because that's how the workforce is set up, I suppose. But definitely at a project base and with multiple roles at a time, we usually work like that.
You touched on a key point there in terms of trying to find people for entry level or junior roles is more of a challenge. So, what is your process of finding suitable talent within Africa?
So I just want to say that in most cases, we don't go about finding the talent. Mostly we provide employment of records solutions. So that would be somebody else coming up to us and saying, hey, I know this person in Africa and I want to employ them. And then we would onboard them under our registry or within our legal rights. So that's what we usually do. And we provide all of the solutions around that, whether it's transportation or onboarding, insurance, as we mentioned earlier. But we do recruiting and we do source talent for people, for our clients. The way we go about it is, as every recruiting firm does, not that we're a recruiting firm, but we do have that branch within the company. We use the regular methods of going to CV databases and advertising it. But the key thing that differentiates us, I would say, and the key thing that we focus on and has brought us the most success is appealing to our network. So the best way to source people is through referrals.
I agree.
If you know somebody who has worked on a specific project in a specific country, chances are that they also know somebody who can provide that service. And it's a lot easier to go up to them and say, hey, can you connect me with somebody from your network that you know can fulfill this job? And then they would connect us with this person and we would, of course, screen them and interview them. But chances are that they can probably do the job. So referrals are very, very high quality leads. We usually rely on that. And because we've worked in the whole world, let alone most of the countries in Africa, but the whole world for years now, that we have a very strong network of professionals and we can probably find people who can provide whatever needs to be provided pretty much anywhere. But there is one caveat, which is that we will never onboard somebody against our client's wishes. So the whole screening process that we do internally will always be shown to the client and forwarded to the client for their approval. And we've had cases in which we found people that we thought were suitable and the clients rejected them and we ended up going back and finding more.
In terms of how people are employed and where they're working within Africa, have you seen a change from, say, the traditional office-based roles to more remote working roles?
Well, the pandemic definitely has brought about some more remote work. I think that the world kind of opened up to that in 2019 and forward up until now. So remote work has definitely become more populated or at least more interesting for clients. I think that one thing that we can see is semi-remote work. And I'm not talking about hybrid. I'm talking about companies that either have some of their employees working remotely or teams that are working remotely, whereas another team is in the office, or in some cases, even local teams situated in Africa that aren't remote. So they go to the office, but the rest of the company itself is remote. So it's just this local team that doesn't do remote work. But yeah, there are some interesting combinations out there. It's definitely a rising trend, and it's definitely something that we can expect more of. Additional people or clients working remotely and interacting. And I think that that's one more thing that will contribute to what we're doing essentially, which is topple the whole, or at least solve the whole market failure that is borders. So we're trying to enable work across borders, and remote work is one of the most significant things to contribute to that. We're very excited about that, and I think it's just going to increase.
Thank you for sharing that. So you mentioned as semi-remote work as a shift that you're currently seeing. So I guess once people are in their roles, as an organization or as a company, how does XML go about investing in nurturing and developing their talent? Or is that left to the employer?
Yes and no. So in many of the cases, our clients are leading companies with leading capabilities, and we can't compete with them in terms of their own knowledge. So a cybersecurity company that comes up to us and wants to onboard someone will have a way better understanding of cybersecurity than we have. Our field of expertise is HR and legal issues across borders. So that's what we focus on. But we do provide training to the employees according to what the client prescribes. So the client would have a certain onboarding process that includes training, and we would make sure that our employees, because they are employed and registered under XML International, we would ensure that they undergo this training and that they reach the level of training that's sufficient to our clients. We also have our own training modules that we prescribe. These are mostly in terms of HR and compliance and best protocols. But in terms of nurturing, there's also something that's a bit more meta than, just training someone upfront for the job. And that is the opportunity that we provide both during the time of employment and afterwards. So let's say you are a potential employee, you're looking for work, and then you find employment through XML. That means that you're now gaining real experience with the real global company, and that's really nurturing. And then let's say that ends because the project comes to an end. Then you're still within the XML International network, and we will probably find you additional employment because we have requests all the time. And so you will continue working and maybe move to a different country to pursue a different opportunity, which shouldn't be a problem because we solve border issues. And that's what we do. So yeah, once an employee starts the journey with us, they can continue pursuing opportunities across the continent or even outside it.
Thank you. So you've detailed I call them trends and processes of nurturing and developing talent within Africa. XML is an international company which can be impacted by international or global trends. So what global workforce trends are you seeing that are impacting or affecting Africa?
That's a brilliant question. The global trends in general kind of mimic what we talked about in Africa in terms of remote work, but also there are some unique differences that are very important to Africa. The thing I'm talking about is essentially a talent mismatch. So we mentioned how places in Africa have a talent surplus. They rarely have a talent deficit, but places elsewhere do have talent deficits. So we are seeing a mismatch, an international mismatch between the work that needs to be done in certain areas and the available talent to fulfill it. So we can see in some places there's a talent deficit. The UK is one such example where we don't have enough people to fulfill the available opportunities. And then we have places which are right in the middle. China, for example. China is pretty balanced in terms of the surplus and talent deficit, so there is neither. And then we have countries in Africa, for example, South Africa, that have a pretty big talent surplus. And I think that the fact that outside of Africa, there's such a talent deficit will lead more companies to look to Africa to solve these problems and to relocate some of their assets and resources to Africa so that they can get work done there. Because as we've mentioned, the world is opening up and we can solve problems a lot more efficiently and a lot more globally now. We're using remote work or just by the fact that we can transfer people. So that's one big trend of external companies looking at Africa to essentially continue their operations because they're experiencing a talent deficit at home. We're also witnessing a lot of people moving to Africa, especially from Asia, to actually set up their own companies or work there for some of the opportunities that are available. So yes, there is a talent surplus, but sometimes the market is not fully efficient. But yeah, I think that this trend of talent deficit elsewhere will lead more and more countries to look at Africa and work there.
Thank you for that. So you mentioned something that is key with regards to the talent mismatch and talent deficit to fulfill available roles outside of Africa. So I guess from your opinion, how can Africa strategically position itself to benefit from the talent deficit of countries outside of Africa?
Yeah, that's a very big question. Africa,
Maybe give me just one example of maybe a country or
yeah.
locality where you've seen them strategically.
What I'm saying is, it's the continent itself, Africa, is massive, right? It's not monolithic. There are a lot of internal differences. But I think that as a whole, it's still a good question because as a whole, the countries in Africa, even though they differ, do share the same experiences and will continue to face these trends from a similar position. And so what I would suggest is going back to nurturing that talent and ensuring that people continue to mature and the workforce continues to mature and we have more skilled workers, while at the same time, and this, I know this is way easier said than done, and is a huge political problem, but solving the whole issue of protections and regulations and developing the economy, not in terms just of monetary success, but also in terms of regulatory development. And that will also affect the economy and put it in a better position to use this opportunity that we're seeing based on talent deficit elsewhere. So if Africa and or countries in Africa allow companies from outside to move to Africa in terms of their own regulations, in terms of the way workforce is treated, and also in terms of the availability of skilled workers, I think that we're going to see Africa grow really quickly in the next 10 years if these needs are met. Those are the things that I would focus on. But again, it's a very monolithic and not necessarily the right approach. Overall, this is the trend that I would describe.
So we talked about how, I guess, in a very broad term, how Africa can better strategically position itself to take advantage of the talent deficits globally. So if we look at it from a different perspective, in terms of the clients that you're working with, what are some of the specific opportunities in employment that are attracting your clients to look for workforce on the continent? I guess slightly outside the discussion of the talent deficit. Is there anything else that's attracting them in terms of opportunities outside of that?
Oh, yes, absolutely. The increase in skilled workers is, I would say, one phenomenon that's concomitant with the general maturity of societies in Africa. And I think that societies in Africa are slowly, and this doesn't apply everywhere because there are major difficulties in some places, but as a whole, societies are becoming a bit wealthier and a bit more capable of consuming. And so this is very attractive to a lot of companies that want to provide these needs for people who are entering the middle class, so to speak, opening up to a lifestyle that in some places it wasn't available 5 years ago. In some places it isn't available now still. But generally speaking, as people in the country continue to grow wealthier, this is something that I would really, really like to see continue. Then in that case, we're going to see a segment of consumers opening up, and then companies will want to operate there just to fulfill a need because, business is all about solving problems. And if people want to consume, then that's a problem that you can solve. And we definitely think that that's something that's attracting more people to the continent. And I hope that it will continue and that hopefully more countries will continue to experience wealth growth.
So you've detailed the trends and opportunities that your clients are seeing that are attracting them to the continent. So if we look at it from your perspective, what trends in African employment are you seeing that you're genuinely currently excited about?
Yeah, I will have to recapitulate some of our conversations because it's mostly going to be the rise of skilled workers, the rise of the middle class and the diminished poverty, more consumption, more work opportunities, the integration of IT infrastructure to allow more skilled work. Hopefully, and this isn't something that I've seen as a trend, but hopefully improvement in regulations and worker protections. All of these things, I think, will lead Africa to become a much more successful continent, or the countries within Africa to be much more successful and to contribute to the well-being of the populace. And I'm very excited about that. And I think that it will happen, although, I do think that progress is never linear, and we're seeing some places that are worse off than they were in the past. Zimbabwe, for example, I would say. But generally speaking, I think that the trend is overall positive, and I would like it to continue to be positive or even accelerate.
Thank you for that. So if we look past current trends and look to the future, and specifically at the countries that you're currently operating in Africa, where do you see Africa in 5 years' time from a, workforce and employment perspective?
Yeah, so I think that it depends on the country, of course. I think that in many places, we're going to see new sectors opening up that weren't available. For example, financial services is something that might become more important as more of these countries get exposure to regular banking. And these are the less, of course, it's not places such as Kenya, it's places such as the Democratic Republic of Congo, for example, which is a country in which we work that doesn't really have a stable banking scene. So we will expect these areas to develop, and I guess it depends on the level of maturity of the country. So places that have already dealt with telecommunications and IT will probably move forward to additional sectors such as engineering or software development. Places that aren't there yet will continue to rely on infrastructure integration and continue to seek IT development. One follows the other, I suppose. But once again, we can never know. And I might be wrong about this, but because I'm no expert. But this is definitely the trend that I would expect. I would expect the countries that are currently less developed to follow suit and get the infrastructure right, and the countries that do have the infrastructure to open up to additional sectors.
Thank you for that. I guess one trend that we do see globally as countries develop is more service-based roles and opportunities. Is this something that you expect to see in Africa, or is this something that you are seeing or not?
I can't say that we are seeing it, but I understand what you're saying, and it's definitely a truth, like an economic truth. The areas in which we work are, I would say, we are limited in our ability to view the whole picture, because we work based on what our clients need. And many of our clients pursue specific solutions and not necessarily in terms of services. I can't really comment on that from our perspective as XML, but as an individual with a minimal economic background, I would say that, that definitely is something that if Africa is going to continue to mature and develop economically, we can expect to see.
Fantastic. Thank you for that. You've given us your view of where you see Africa in 5 years' time from a workforce and employment perspective. If we look closer to home, where do you see yourself and XML in 5 years' time with regards to the work that you'll be doing on the continent?
Yes, yeah. So XML International, where I see it in 5 years is there's a twofold answer to that. So firstly, I would like to see XML International continue on its, or I expect to see it continue on its trajectory of exponential growth, because we're definitely solving a problem that many clients have, many potential clients don't even know that they have, and just go the traditional way of opening legal entities where they don't necessarily need to do so. So I hope that we will continue to onboard more and more employees, connect this network, solve these problems for our clients, while also opening additional legal entities and connecting even more countries, or enabling work there as well, because our work isn't done yet and we still need to cover additional countries that don't fall under our umbrella. But one interesting thing that I think we might introduce, or we will introduce in 5 years, is employment without a human in the loop. So what do I mean by that? There are two types of employment, of cross-border employment. There's generally speaking, right? There's complex and there's simple. So if you need a complex solution, if you need to deploy someone and move them across very many borders with a lot of insurance involved and visa problems, then you will need an expert team to solve that for you. But if you just need someone on the ground and you're dealing with them and they're a local worker and there's no real legal challenge, it's only a matter of opening a legal entity. These two things are separate in nature. And in 5 years or even shorter, because we're already launching something like that, we will expect to solve the simple ones. So in terms of complex solutions, you will always need to speak to someone and a legal team to get involved and somebody to be in the loop. But in terms of just employing someone that already works there, just because you don't, and you can't employ them just because you don't have a legal entity, right now, it shouldn't be the same process. And it is, both for us and for our competitors. You go and you talk to someone and then they give you a quote and everything. What we want to happen is that people will be able to automate the whole process, rather use an automated process. So they would just click a button, and at the click of a button, the system will generate for them, or a system, because I haven't introduced it yet, but a system will generate for them a fully compliant contract according to the laws and regulations of that country, with a quote that meets the complexities of operating there. And that's something that we as a company are doing because we have very large network of employees and a lot of experience in working in very many countries. We know all of the details already, so we've just automated the whole process. And that's something that we're launching. It's called Remundo. And we expect this to be the future of global employment and cross-border employment, because the majority of people and employees, especially smaller clients that want to work in Africa but don't need complex solutions, just need to tap into that surplus, the talent surplus on which we've already spoken. Those people just need a very simple solution. And we want to democratize it and make it accessible to everyone, and very, very simple, very quick and cheaper because it doesn't involve people. And that's what we're developing. And that's where I see the future of the company and the future of global work, really.
Awesome. That sounds extremely interesting and exciting. And I look forward to seeing how the system develops in the future.
Quote of the week.
As people, we often have quotes, mantras, proverbs, or even affirmations that keep us going when times are hard or when times are good. Do you have one that you can share with us today?
Okay, yes, I do have a proverb for you. It's not really a proverb. It's something that my friend told me once.
Keep it clean.
No, don't worry. But no, he said something. You know, we were in the submarine fleet together, and times can be rough there. So what he said, I can say it in Hebrew, but I won't. I'll say it in English. What he said was, "The end is always good, and if it's not good now, then it's not the end." Essentially, just look forward, keep on there. It's gonna get better. But yeah, I like how it rings.
No, definitely. It's got me thinking. Thank you for sharing that, Noam. Into your friend's a very wise person.
Well, he isn't, but don't tell him. He just got one. He got lucky.
Fantastic. Thank you. As we've come to the close of today's conversation, it's been a great conversation. I was hoping you could give us any closing remarks, final calls to action for anyone who might be interested in the work that you do, or just interested in workforce solutions, mobility within Africa.
Yes, absolutely. And firstly, I would say thank you, Tercer, for having me. It's been a great conversation. If any listener is trying to overcome border problems in Africa or outside Africa and wants to bring their company to Africa or tap into local talent, because these are both things that we can see help the continent and generally help companies, feel free to reach out at noam.k@xmlint.com. And yeah, I'd be happy to answer any emails.
Fantastic. And also, I'll be putting your details on the show notes of the podcast episode. So if people want to get in contact, they can via, I guess, LinkedIn and any other means possible.
Yes, absolutely.
Fantastic. We've come to the end of today's conversation. It's been a great conversation, extremely interesting. It sounds like you and XML are doing some amazing and valuable work on the continent, and long may it continue. Thank you for your time today and joining us on the podcast.
Thank you, Tersa. Thank you. It's been really great.
Thank you, Noam. And we will speak soon.
All right. Thank you, Tersa.
Thank you to everyone who has listened and stayed tuned to the podcast. If you've enjoyed this episode, please subscribe, share, or tell a friend about it. You can also rate, review us in Apple Podcasts or wherever you download your podcast. Thank you, and see you next week for the Unlocking Africa podcast.